Bijan, Gibbs, Laporta, Stroud, Puka. We were treated to some incredible rookie performances this season. Between awesome game-winning drives, 100 receiving yard games, and late season explosions, we have one of the most contentious Rookie of the Year races in recent memory. But after it all, who actually deserves to go home with the Rookie of the Year award? How can you compare a quarterback with a receiver or a running back with a tight end? Can we, using raw numbers in history, successfully determine who should win one of the most coveted awards in football in a year where there are more legitimate candidates than there are fingers on a hand? I wanted to know, so I compiled a ton of stats to answer these questions. The first thing we need is a sample group to compare against this year's rookies. So I went back 10 years and collected the standard stats of each season's top 3 finishers. Games, yardage, touchdowns, stuff like that. Next, using a secret formula, I basically combined all of those stats into a single number, something that could be used to compare both within a position and against other positions. For example, let's take receivers. First, I collected the receptions, yards, and touchdowns of each top 3 rookie years since 2013. This included guys like Odell Beckham Jr., Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, etc. Next, I took the highest number of receptions in the sample, subtracted it from the lowest number, then divided this from each specific player's reception count minus the lowest number again. All of that got me a gradient of values between 1 and 0 for every single player, where the highest reception total in the sample earned a score of 1, the lowest earned a score of 0, and everyone else fell somewhere in the middle. Then I repeated this for yards and touchdowns, and combined all 3 stats into one number by weighing yardage slightly more heavily than the other 2 stats. I repeated this process for running backs, then for quarterbacks, and I kinda just left out offensive linemen since there's not really a candidate who's an offensive lineman this year, and because it's kinda hard to find stats about offensive linemen. Next, I needed to figure out which players had a chance to win the award this year. To find this, I simply went to a betting site and found the rookies with the highest odds of winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. I'll talk about each of them throughout this video, but there's pretty much 8 candidates who have had at least a notable impact on the league this year. Finally, I combined my existing sample of players since 2013 with this year's candidates, wrapping them all together into the same formula, and got to work making this chart. Alright, now that we're all caught up on what's happening here are the top 8 Rookie of the Year candidates in order based on their production this season. Eighth on our list is Zay Flowers, who's only ahead of Giovanni Bernard's 2013 season on this chart by a single point. He had 858 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns on 77 catches as a rookie this past year. We watched him a few weeks ago in the playoffs. He's a very talented player with a bright future, but he still has rookie errors to iron out before he becomes a fully fledged star. Most of it really wasn't his fault though. The so-called weapons in the Ravens receiver room were lackluster at best, and without major impact coming from OBJ or Rashad Bateman, and with Mark Andrews' mid-season injury sidelining him, there was a lot of pressure on Flowers during the conference championship to make plays. And despite his costly mistakes during the game, he still ended up with high impact plays and 115 yards through the air. During another season with fewer incredible rookies, Zay might have had a stronger case towards the top, but even as unlikely as he is to win Rookie of the Year, he still has a very bright future. In 7th, we have Devon Achane, scoring a 20 in our formula. Achane probably won't win Rookie of the Year, but he was absolutely a noteworthy player this year, and he deserves his credit either way. On just 103 carries, he rushed for 800 yards and 8 touchdowns this season, averaging a touch under 8 yards per carry, in one of the most mind-boggling displays of efficiency over the course of a season in NFL history. If you watched any Dolphins games this year, you know anytime he had the ball in his hands, he was a threat to score. He had by far the fewest opportunities of any running back on this chart, yet somehow had more yards than Gio Bernard and Alvin Kamara, and more rushing touchdowns than Bernard, Josh Jacobs, and Bijan Robinson. He only started 4 games this season, and somehow he produced highlight after highlight on limited touches as a rookie, and he probably won't sniff the award, but he is certainly worth mentioning. Speaking of Bijan, the number 6 spot belongs to the Falcons rookie running back, who rushed for a hair short of 1,000 yards, 8 total touchdowns, and caught 58 passes for 487 yards. From a fantasy perspective, he had a disappointing season, constantly grappling with Arthur Smith, pulling him from games, and using random hodgepodges of bench players on the goal line instead of him. Maybe if Arthur had been a little bit more acquiescent to the talent of his players, he'd still have a job, but who knows. From a fan's perspective, Bijan represented more of a mixed bag. On one hand, we saw his talent shine week in and week out with astounding juke moves and pass catching, but on the other, his true potential value was muddied among bad coaching, bad quarterback play, and the expectations of a top 10 pick. He'll be exciting to watch next season once he hopefully ascends to a greater role, but for now, he's just the 6th best offensive rookie this year. Next up is a guy who really started to heat up down the stretch and will likely play a huge role in the upcoming Super Bowl. I'm of course talking about Rashee Rice, the rookie receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs. Amid the Kelsey Swift hubbub, the hilarious Kadarius Toney jokes, and the DUI of a certain quarterback's father, it's easy to forget how good Rice was at the end of the season. He only started 8 weeks of the year, most coming after Casey's Week 10 loss to Philly when they finally started to uncork their explosive rookie. In fact, I think you guys need a bonus chart to see exactly what I'm talking about here. Here's the impact he had in every regular season game this year, measured by fantasy points and offensive snap percentage. Games before Week 10 are white, and games after Week 10 are red. Look at how much better he became once he started getting opportunities, and imagine what he might have done with a full season's worth of starts. During the first half of the season, he averaged 6.5 points per game and 47% snap share. During the second half, though, he averaged 11.3 points on 78% of snaps. This marked improvement helped a lot of people in their fantasy leagues, but more importantly, it gave Patrick Mahomes a badly needed reliable weapon flanking Travis Kelce. If he hadn't turned it up to this degree, whether or not Casey would have made it back to the Super Bowl this year is anyone's guess. After Rice comes likely the best rookie running back this year, and the first player on our list to record a score higher than a previous Rookie of the Year, Jahmyr Gibbs, a guy I had on my fantasy team before trading him for Tony Pollard 2 weeks into the season. Awful management decisions aside, he scored 35 points in our model compared to 33 for Garrett Wilson's campaign last year, which was statistically the weakest offensive Rookie of the Year winner in our sample. He recorded 945 rushing yards, 316 receiving yards, and 11 touchdowns in just 3 starts and 15 total games. He took a full-time role during the middle of the season after David Montgomery got hurt and took full advantage, putting up 126 and 189 scrimmage yards in 2 consecutive games that Monty didn't play. In any other year, he would probably be the runner-up or third-place winner for this award, but he doesn't even crack the podium this year due to how stacked our rookie class is. Gibbs might not get it, but he can be consoled with the fact that the number 3 player on this list is his teammate, Sam Laporta, who scored 41 points. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why is his column a different color? And why does it say tight end / wide receiver? What's up with that? Well, when I say Laporta had one of the most unique seasons out of anyone this year, I'm telling the truth. He's actually the only tight end on this list. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, there are a few O-linemen who met our criteria to be put on this chart. Creed Humphrey, Quentin Nelson, and Zach Martin. But tracking and evaluating linemen based on stats is more difficult than, say, a running back. So I just left them off. So where the heck does that leave Sam Laporta? There are no other tight ends or even linemen to compare him to. And since our entire scoring system revolves around how good a player is relative to historical data, how are we supposed to evaluate him? Well, I decided to make an executive decision and lump his stats in with the wide receivers on this chart, since that's where most of his in-game impact lies. Obviously, it's a slight underrepresentation of his value, but it still tells us something about how freaking good his season was this year. He scored 41 points as a rookie, outproducing Keenan Allen, Garrett Wilson, Amari Cooper, and A.J. Brown's rookie seasons. As a tight end, that's insane. But what's even crazier is that he broke the record for receptions as a rookie tight end, a record that had stood for 35 years. Compared to other recent great rookie tight end seasons, he did something guys like Kyle Pitts and Evan Engram couldn't do. He finished with 889 yards, the 4th most receiving yards for a rookie tight end, and 10 touchdowns, the 2nd most of all time. But here's the issue for him. Remember the other guys, Kyle Pitts and Evan Engram? Well, they accomplished similar feats to Laporta in 2021 and 2017. They didn't win Offensive Rookie of the Year, but you would guess that they were at least close, right? Wrong. Neither of them ended up with a single vote for Rookie of the Year, losing out on votes to guys like 1,700 passing yards Deshaun Watson and certified fraud Mac Jones. So if history has anything to say about Laporta's chances, it seems he won't get his due credit this year, despite having outperformed both Pitts and Engram and being a critical part of a Lions team who might have just had their best season in modern franchise history. Any other year, maybe. But his competition is fierce, and he sits awkwardly on the outside looking in. Now the question we've all been waiting for. Between the final two contenders, who deserves the award? You know them, you witnessed their awe-inspiring history rewriting rookie years, you love them. Give it up for Puka Nacua and CJ Stroud. Both of these guys scored above 70 points in our system, and by all means they both deserve the award. In fact, the only second place winner who scored more points than them was Zeke Elliott's monstrous 2016 season. That season featured a race that gives us valuable insight into what might happen this year, but I'll get to that. Let's talk about Puka first. Puka came into the season unknown by even the most diehard Rams fans, but wasted no time in becoming a star, recording 119, 147, 72, and 163 yards in his first 4 games of the year. He quickly became a preferred target of Matthew Stafford and heated up again down the stretch with 164 and 118 yards in his final 2 meaningful games. At that point, the Rams had locked up a playoff berth and decided to approach Week 17 more nonchalantly, resting Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and Kyren Williams ahead of their wildcard game. Only one issue. Puka was 28 yards away from the all-time rookie receiving yardage record. Seeking to etch his name in history, Puka suited up and midway through the third quarter caught a 7-yard pass followed by a 6-yard pass to become the all-time rookie receiving yardage leader. I don't know what's more impressive, that he did this as a 5th-round draft pick, or that he closed it out with Carson Wentz as his quarterback. He ended the season with 105 receptions on 160 targets for 1,486 yards and 6 touchdowns. According to our metrics, it's tied for the second most impressive rookie wide receiver season of the past decade. Only Jamar Chase had a better year, mostly due to a 7-touchdown advantage over Puka. Like so many other players on this list, any other year Puka would be a sure thing to win this award. But unfortunately for him, CJ Stroud stands in the way. This season, the number 2 overall pick compiled 4,108 yards, 23 passing touchdowns, and 5 interceptions on 64% completion percentage. Behind Justin Herbert and Dak Prescott, he has statistically the 3rd best rookie quarterback season of our sample. But what's more than the numbers was the intangible impact he brought to the Texans this year. Similar to Dak, he stepped in as a rookie and led his city to the playoffs. Even more impressive was the way that he, along with D'Amico Ryans, transformed the perennial 1st overall pick contender into a divisional round competitor. If you watched him play this year, you know that his impact goes far beyond the stat sheet. He simply makes the team around him better, and he's undoubtedly quieted his haters by proving being good in the NFL is more than scoring well on a pre-draft test. But the question still remains. Between him and Puka, who had the better season? Puka broke an age-old record, Stroud changed an equally age-old culture, and both had incredible years. But only one can win the award, and in my eyes there are actually 4 potential answers to this question. First, what does the chart say? The chart says that Puka should win, by a score of 77 to 74, but the problem is that it's by no means a perfect methodology. For example, the chart says that Dak's rookie year was better than Stroud's by 6 points, but the differences in their numbers would suggest otherwise. Dak might have had 4% higher completion rate and 1 fewer interception, but Stroud had 400 more yards. There's no way that makes Dak 6 points better than Stroud. If anything, Stroud has a case to be straight up better than Dak. Maybe if you compare the 6 rushing touchdowns that Dak scored to the 3 scored by CJ, you might understand it a little bit better, but the point remains. This formula is by no means perfect. Second, who do I think should win? While I don't think the point system is perfect, I agree in principle that Puka should win the award. In this sample, he has debatably the best wide receiver season. And while Stroud might have a case to be better than Dak, his season pales in comparison to that of Justin Herbert. I think that Puka breaking a record that had stood for decades was the most impressive rookie accomplishment this year, and I think what he did was marginally more difficult than what CJ did, especially being a 5th-round pick. But that's just my opinion, and a lot of people would disagree with it. Which brings us to number 3. What will likely happen? What will be the real result after all the AP voters have submitted their ballots? Well, if voting odds are any indication, CJ should run away with the award. More than that, we have a decent historical precedent for what happens when a winning quarterback with great stats is matched up against a skill position player with historical production. And we've actually talked about both of the players in question already. Dak and Zeke. In 2016, they both had incredible seasons, and despite Zeke compiling the 3rd most rushing yards of all time for a rookie running back, finishing as a first-team All-Pro player, and finishing 3rd in the MVP vote, Dak still ended up taking home Offensive Rookie of the Year. This historical precedent gives us insight into a truth regarding the award. When faced with the quarterback skill position dilemma, even historic production from a skill player isn't enough to offset the sheer importance of the quarterback position in modern football. Something similar happened in 2020 with Justin Jefferson and Justin Herbert, though Herbert's case was a little bit more clear-cut. So with this bias in mind, the truth seems to be that CJ will win the award this year, deservedly so, despite the also deserving season that Puka had. And this brings up the fourth answer. What should happen? What should the answer be when two players play their hearts out for an entire year and end up falling almost directly parallel in what they accomplished in a year? When it gets down to it, the answer is actually pretty simple. Co-winners. Both of these players deserve the award. Both of them should share the title of Offensive Rookie of the Year. It's happened before for MVP, and I can think of no better solution than for these players to both be recognized for their historic impact on the game. That's all for the video. Hope you enjoyed.